It's a great, great pleasure to welcome back Anne Baring and to hand over to you, Philip. Thank you.
Hello, Jonathan, thank you very much. And a really warm, heartfelt welcome to you, Anne. We are all so happy to have you back with us at the Study Society for the second time. Tonight, I believe you are giving us a talk entitled New Wine in New Bottles, the Changing Image of God. But perhaps before I hand over to you, and for those who are not so familiar with you or your work, Anne is a Jungian analyst, international speaker, and world-renowned author, historian, and mystic. And you've written 7 books. Your early work in the 90s included a masterwork on the divine feminine, written with Jules Cashford, called The Myth of the Goddess, the Evolution of an Image. This hugely researched work established you as one of the great pioneers of the divine feminine. And you have written many books on the feminine principle, including Soul Power, An Agenda for a Conscious Humanity, written with Scylla Ellsworthy. And you have also written a book based on the Sufi text Conference of the Birds, called The Birds Which Flew Beyond Time. That's the next read I'm going to have, definitely. However, your most recent magnum opus took you 20 years to write. The Dream of the Cosmos. I was going to show it to everyone. The Dream of the Cosmos. A Quest for the Soul. And if you forgive me, I'm going to quote Richard Tarnas, who wrote a really beautiful introduction to this book. As my own words actually are not capable of doing this work justice. So I'll read this short introduction to your book. Anne Baring has devoted her life to humanity's recovery of the anima mundi, the soul of the world, and indeed its own soul. The Dream of the Cosmos is the climax of that quest, the fruit of a lifetime of thought and feeling, learning and vision. It is the story of a dramatic personal journey, but also an attempt to confront the greatest issues facing our time. Every page breathes her moral passion, her love of beauty, her spiritual aspiration, her deep care for the earth. And above all, Anne Baring calls for a fundamental transformation in the way human beings live on this earth and with each other. It would not be too much to say that this book is a cri de coeur from a place deep in the collective psyche that carries not only our past, but our future. The Dream of the Cosmos pulses with fierce tenderness and grave urgency of love for an infinitely precious new being struggling to be born. And I know that myself, that new being struggling to be born. So Anne, it's beautiful, lovely to have you back, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that lovely introduction and for those words of Richard Tarnas, which mean so much to me. Lovely to be here again. I'll just have to share my screen and do these kind of things. Jesus said that we cannot put new wine into old bottles, lest the bottles break and the wine runs out. New wine has to be put into new bottles in order that both are preserved. 2,000 years after his time, as we leave the age of Pisces and enter the age of Aquarius, in a time of great peril, we stand on the threshold of a new revelation, the new wine, The old concept or image of God cannot hold the new wine. A new vision of reality and a new image or concept of God is needed because the old one is incomplete. While the image of God we have created in the distant past may die, the sacred or the numinous cannot die. After an interval marked by symptoms of cultural and social disintegration, a new image may appear unheralded from the depths of the human soul and from an unexpected direction. Now, the new James Webb Telescope has given us astonishing images of the ever-expanding and marvelous universe that we're part of, but our concept of God has not kept pace with these. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was aware of this when he wrote in his book, The Future of Man, the human world of today is ardently searching for a God proportionate to the new dimensions of a universe whose appearance has completely revolutionized the scale of our faculty of worship. Despite the revelation these marvelous images are giving us, ours is a culture which has no vision. It is at present imprisoned in a dying or outworn image of God and in a secular view of reality which has cut us off from relationship with the earth and the cosmos. Countless millions live their lives in bondage to patriarchal images of God, which are limited in concept and rigid in their authoritarian control over the human spirit. The feminine aspect of the divine has long been banished from the monotheistic image of God held by these patriarchal religions. And we can see the result in the disgraceful persecution of women in Afghanistan and Iran, and inflated leaders who believe they have a God-given right to invade and annex the territory of other nations. It seems as if male political and religious leaders may unconsciously identify themselves with the God image, acting with the utmost brutality in their desire to impose their will on the populations that they rule over. And they may claim today, as they did in the past, that what they are doing is God's will. Oh, now what's happened? Something's happened, gone wrong again. I'm sorry, but I've got in a muddle. No, I haven't. This is the image of God that we've created, that we've inherited from the book of Genesis. It shows God creating the earth from a distance. God is something separate from creation and from us. In this century, many millions of people are still contained within this image. Millions of others believe in God, but take no part in organized religion. And there are many millions who believe in scientific materialism, whose ideology has banished both God and the soul. Now, this is Putin's bomb, a bomb that's capable of destroying 5 cities and all their inhabitants at once. Putin is a Christian and is supported by Patriarch Kirill, head of the Russian Orthodox Church. Both of them believe that he has a God-given right to invade the territory of another nation that was once part of the Soviet Union. There is neither compassion nor guilt for the thousands of young men whose lives will be sacrificed to their belief. Already, I read in the paper today, some 60,000 young Russian lives. How has such a religion of love become a religion that justifies violence and destruction on such an epic scale? Lest anyone think I am demonizing Putin, I feel equally strongly about the nuclear weapons of the so-called Christian nations, the US and the UK, whose Trident submarines each carry 40 nuclear warheads. These are all demonic engines of destruction. Christian civilization has been on the wrong path for nearly 2,000 years, intent on power and dominance, and completely cut off out of touch with the teaching of its founder, serving instead the power principle, or what Jesus called the ruler or master of the world. The unconscious addiction to power by the so-called Christian nations has led us to this weapon, appropriately named Satan. In a book called Sophia, an Austrian woman called Susanne Schaub wrote these powerful words: "That which gives a culture legitimacy is ultimately its underlying concept of God. If this concept does not change, nothing can actually change. No scientific, ecological, or social paradigm shift can take effect as long as the theological paradigm does not change with it. Patriarchy is still the prevailing world order, and if this is to change, we need a new perception of God. Many women, as well as an increasing number of men, no longer accept the traditional image of God because it lacks the feminine." Now I'm going to look just at an overview of 3 phases of evolution. The philosopher Owen Barfield, in his remarkable book, Saving the Appearances, described 3 phases in the evolution of human consciousness. The first stage he named as one of original participation, the second phase one of separation from nature, and the third phase of final participation. Jules Cashford and I took this as the template for our book, The Myth of the Goddess, and I did the same in my recent book, The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul. In chapter 17 of that book, called New Wine in New Bottles, A New Image of God, I described the primary revelation of this third and final phase that we are entering now. The God that we've been worshipping for 2,000 years as something distant and separate from ourselves is beginning to be seen as the divine ground of the whole created order, including our own consciousness. And I will return to this idea later. So very briefly, the 3 phases. The first is the phase of the Great Mother, when we really felt ourselves contained within her being. Her womb, as it were, was the source of all of life that came out of it. In the second phase of separation, we began to get a separation between mind and soul, and we began to see the cosmos and God and the world as an object. And that's lasted for 4,000 years, that second phase. And now I think we're just entering the final phase, where soul and mind are reunited, and we experience union with the divine ground, as well as conscious participation in an ensouled universe. So I hope and pray that this is the phase that we're just about to begin in, with an interim difficult phase of collapse and what's happening now, really, we can see all over the world. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, wrote in The Inner Reaches of Outer Space that from time to time the image of God has to die if it is not to become an idol. When this vital insight is lost, we may cling to an old image of God and insist that it must not be changed. Cut off from its living roots, the psyche falls under the spell of its own creation. People assume that the image of God handed down from the past is a final and complete revelation, which must be implicitly adhered to. To challenge it is heresy or blasphemy. And when this happens, there can be no psychic growth, only a stultifying inertia, and also a state of profound anxiety caused by the loss of God, which may cause us to regress into a more unconscious state than we're already in. And that's the great danger of the present time. Now, last time you may remember that I spoke to you at some length about the disastrous effects of the myth of the fall, and how in 621 BCE, a group of priests called Deuteronomists got control of the first temple in Jerusalem. And in a powerful coup, they got rid of the goddess Asherah, worshipped then as divine wisdom and the Holy Spirit, leaving her husband Yahweh as the sole creator God. This event over 2.5 millennia ago led to the eradication of the divine feminine from the Godhead in both Judaism and Christianity, because Christianity took its image of God from the Old Testament, as well as the myth of the fall, the myth which had designated earth as a place of punishment for the sin of disobeying the command of God. I won't go into all the details that I did last year, because that talk is actually still up on YouTube and you could read it there if you want to refresh your memories. This is a painting by Cecil Collins, whom I'm going to come to soon. With the loss of the divine feminine, Western civilization developed on the foundation of a fundamental dissociation between spirit and nature, creator and creation. This dissociation destroyed the sacredness of nature and the ancient shamanic ability to connect and communicate with the soul of the cosmos. It also destroyed our ability to recognize the immanence of spirit within the material world, opening the way to its exploitation and desacralization. The loss of the divine feminine had the ultimate effect of the earth and nature becoming no longer sacred, leading to the crisis we find ourselves in now. I love that painting. It hangs in my bedroom. Now, years ago, I found this astonishing sentence in a book called The Life Divine by Sri Aurobindo, one of the greatest sages of the last century. If it be true, he wrote, that spirit is involved in matter and apparent nature is secret God, then the manifestation of the divine in himself and the realization of God within and without are the highest and most legitimate aim possible to man on earth. That's an extraordinary passage, I think. Very, very profound. Now, when we say the Lord's Prayer, we rely on a translation from Greek and Hebrew texts, originally made in the early 16th century by William Tyndale, who was hounded to his execution in the Low Countries for the heresy of translating the Bible into English. His translation formed the basis of the King James Bible that are so familiar to us. Neither Tyndale, a genius who spoke 12 languages by the age of 21, nor any of the later scholars involved in the translation could draw on the Aramaic language that Jesus spoke, simply because they didn't know about it and had no access to it. Neil Douglas Klotz took the trouble to learn Aramaic, and in his wonderful book, Prayers of the Cosmos, has given us the translation of the Aramaic words of the Lord's Prayer. The words, Our Father who art in heaven, become, O Father, Mother, birther of the cosmos. So in the very first words of this prayer, we find the divine feminine in the image of God. That was a great discovery for me to find his book, The Prayers of the Cosmos, because it goes on much longer. That's only the first phrase of this very long translation. O Father, Mother, birther of the cosmos. We also find the divine feminine in the first chapter of Genesis, where God creates man and woman in his image. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over every living thing that moveth upon the earth. We now know how much misunderstanding has come from the words subdue and dominion, but why has the fact that God apparently had a feminine aspect been deliberately overlooked, with all the attention being directed to the second chapter of Genesis and its very different story of the creation of Adam and Eve? When there is a need for us to move forward in our evolutionary journey, the old image of the divine begins to lose the numinous fascination it's held for centuries. For increasing numbers, religion becomes meaningless. God is pronounced dead and outgrown superstition. Secular rituals replace religious ones. But alchemy gives us the image of an old king who has to die in order for a new image of the sacred to manifest. And we're currently living through the phase that the alchemists called the death of the old king. The process of the killing of the old king, or the dying of the old image of God, began in the 17th century and developed rapidly in the 18th, in the Age of Enlightenment or Age of Reason. Until this time, the Catholic Church held absolute political power in Europe, which it exercised ruthlessly. The Jungian analyst, the late Edward Edinger, summed up the effects of the death of God in his book, The Creation of Consciousness, Jung's Myth for Modern Man. He said that the breakdown of a central myth is like the shattering of a vessel containing a precious essence. The fluid is spilled and drains away, soaked up by the surrounding and undifferentiated matter. Meaning is lost, and in its place, primitive and atavistic contents are reactivated. Differentiated values disappear and are replaced by the elemental motivations of power and pleasure, or else the individual is exposed to emptiness and despair. I think that is a precise description of what has happened to our culture today. And also, it's visible in the rise of communism and fascism in the last century. Yet there are signs of the soul awakening in the human psyche. After an interval marked by symptoms of cultural and social disintegration and by the deadening influence of a materialist ideology, a new image of the sacred appears unheralded from the soul. This image is discovered and defined through the life of many individuals who are not satisfied by the old image of the sacred and feel impelled to search for a new relationship with the transcendent. They may be drawn to search through a sudden experience of the numinous, a visionary dream, or a debilitating depression, which can be understood as an urgent call from the soul to listen to the voice of what Jung called the spirit of the depths. Jung himself responded to this call after a tremendous premonitory dream of the First World War. He knew that the power of Christianity was waning and that we needed a radically different image of God, one that included nature and matter. He called this painting the spirit above a world of war and technology. Later he wrote, and this is a very important passage, "We have become participants in the divine life, and we have to assume a new responsibility. The responsible living and fulfilling of the divine love in us will be our form of worship of and commerce with God. His goodness means grace and light, and his dark side, the terrible temptation of power. Man has already received so much knowledge that he can destroy his own planet. Let us hope that God's good spirit will guide him in his decisions, because it will depend on man's decision whether God's creation will continue." Now he realized that the conscious mind or ego is only a tiny part of the psyche, that triangle at the top, that yellow triangle, and is completely unaware that there are deeper dimensions or layers of consciousness beneath it. Dr. Ian McGilchrist has shown in the greatest detail in his books, The Master and His Emissary, and recently, The Matter with Things, a huge 2-volume work, how century by century, the left hemisphere of the brain has virtually closed down the visionary right hemisphere. So if you can see with this diagram, we have the personal unconsciousness beneath the conscious ego, but far deeper than that, we have the matrix of the primordial soul, which is connected to nature and beyond that to the cosmos. And that's where the spirit of the depths comes from that deepest part of ourselves that is connected to both nature and the cosmos. I hope that's as clear as can be made possible. So we carry within our psyche a very ancient kind of consciousness or experience of life that I call lunar consciousness and associate with the timeless wisdom of the soul. It is an instinctive, feminine, participatory, relational way of knowing, mediated through the heart and the right hemisphere of the brain, as well as enhanced sensory observation and intuition that opens the path between two dimensions of reality. We need to reconnect with this lost consciousness and learn to listen again to what Jung called the spirit of the depths or the voice of the soul. We need urgently to reconnect with nature and the cosmos within us as well as outside. Why has visionary experience vanished? The definition of a visionary prior to 1650 was one who was able and accustomed to see visions. By 1750, when the belief that the physical universe was the only real one was becoming established in philosophical and scientific circles, the definition changed to someone who sees something which is not real. Today, a visionary may be defined as someone who suffers from delusions or hallucinations. The change in perception has come about because, following the philosophy of Descartes and the Enlightenment of the 18th century, scientific materialism became deeply established in scientific and philosophical circles, together with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. William Blake, together with the Romantic poets, was one of the last great visionaries of that time, as shown in this painting called The Ascent to Other Worlds. He knew about other worlds. He was in touch with them. He used to sit in his garden talking to them with his wife by his side. But there have been other visionaries closer to our own time. And this extraordinary painting by Henry Moore, called A Crowd of People Looking at a Tied-Up Object, was painted in 1942. It shows that some revelation is at hand. People are gathered at the foot of the shrouded figure and are waiting, wondering what will be revealed when the cord is cut and the shroud removed. What I believe they are waiting for is a new revelation of the sacred, which could unite the whole of humanity, a revelation which includes yet transcends all previous revelations, not a new image to worship, not a new religion or belief system, but a new understanding of the divine, a new experience of God, including the feminine aspect of God. Not long after this picture was painted in 1951, a poet called Christopher Fry, who also wrote The Lady Is Not for Burning, wrote these powerful words in a play called A Sleep of Prisoners that I remember seeing with my mother and father. The human heart may go the length of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries breaks, cracks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flows, the thaw, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to face us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul men ever took. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. Where are you making for? It takes so many 1,000 years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake? Such a powerful poem. Now, at approximately the same time, Cecil Collins was producing his masterpieces. This is called Christ Before the Judge, and it applies as much to our time as it did to the time of Christ. He knew that visionary experience is a neglected but essential aspect of our soul, and that our culture is incomplete and impoverished if it fails to take visionary experience in the ancient interpretation of its meaning, that of receiving revelation, inspiration, and guidance from a transcendent dimension of consciousness that used to be called spirit. In focusing so much on the rational mind, he knew that we've lost touch with the heart and the soul. He taught for many years at the Central School of Art in London and only received the recognition he was due in the last 3 years of his life. You can find an illustrated article about him on my original website. And here are 3 of his paintings, which are one favorites of mine. Christ Before the Judge hangs in Winchester Cathedral. We donated it to the cathedral about 20 years ago. This is called The Oracle, drawn in 1940, just at the beginning of the war. Extraordinary drawing.
Amazing.
And this one is called The Eternal Bride, painted in 1960. So there you have the feminine coming up very strongly in a beautiful painting. And here we have a painting that frightens some people, I know, because it frightened my father. My mother bought it, but he persuaded her to sell it to the Tate. So that's where it is now. It's called Angel of the Flowing Light, painted in 1968. And I just love it. It is powerful. It is alarming, but it's also evocative of the deep unconscious of the soul. Now, some 50 years ago, I had a visionary dream of a cosmic woman whose form reached from Earth to the highest reaches of starry heavens. This dream was the most awesome experience of my life, the true awakener of my soul. I was lying flat on the ground, caught in a gigantic net, gazing up at the vision of a beautiful naked cosmic woman manifesting in the night sky. In her abdomen was an enormous wheel. Looking up at her and then down at my own body, I saw that I too had a wheel in my abdomen, but it was on the left-hand side. She did not speak, but indicated that I was to center my wheel. Being in Jungian analysis at that time, I took this to mean that I needed to become more conscious of her presence and of the divine feminine in general. Since then, my life has been focused on service of the divine feminine, the archetype that stands for our relationship with nature and with the earth and the cosmos. Relationship is the key word. In chapter 10 of my book, The Dream of the Cosmos, I define the feminine as a totally different worldview or paradigm of reality, a perspective that regards this planet as part of a sacred cosmic order, whose precious life we are meant to protect and to serve. So I've recently written a definition of the feminine, which I will read now. And you'll see why I've chosen this image of Cinderella and the fairy godmother. The divine feminine is the soul of the cosmos, the feminine dimension of the Godhead, God the Mother, invisible guide and presence. She appears as the godmother in fairy tales like Cinderella. Once named Holy Spirit and divine wisdom, she has been lost for millennia during the patriarchal era, yet never completely forgotten. In ancient Judaism, she was worshipped as the tree of life, divine wisdom, and the Holy Spirit. In Essene or Gnostic Christianity, Kabbalah, and alchemy, she was known as divine wisdom or Sophia. She was known to Jesus, who spoke often of his mother, the Holy Spirit, in the gospel written by his beloved wife, Mary Magdalene, that I will come to in a moment. The concept of the feminine Holy Spirit did not die out entirely. In the 12th century, the Holy Spirit was secretly carried throughout Europe in the image of the Holy Grail. It's so obvious that that's what the synonym really for the Holy Grail was, the Holy Spirit. Her most ancient symbol is the rose that we can find exalted in the great rose windows of Chartres Cathedral, built in the same 12th century. The divine feminine is returning to us now as we face the greatest challenge we have ever had to face: how to birth the understanding that life is one, that we are all connected to each other, that we are all immortal children of God, participants in the source from which we have come and to which we will return. We cannot birth this understanding without becoming servants of the divine feminine and the values that she embodies. And these values are justice, truth, compassion, love, service, and relationship, and the impulse to create beauty. Our culture has forgotten these values, but they are returning through the work of many inspired individuals. Now I have to go back historically to the crucial Council of Nicaea in 325 of the Christian era, and you can find it in the map on the left, up near the Dardanelles. I never knew where it was until I found this map on Google. It was a great help. This is the council where, once again, as in the banishment of the goddess from Judaism, we lost the divine feminine. The most significant development to take place in Christian theology was the doctrine that Jesus was the Son of God. And this doctrine was officially established at the Council of Nicaea, which had been summoned by the Emperor Constantine to settle the definition of the nature of Jesus. Amid scenes of furious disagreement between two groups of bishops who actually came to blows with each other, it was decided that Jesus was the Son of God because he was begotten of God and of the same substance as God, rather than a human being who was only like unto God. Naming him the Son of God meant that he had to be immaculately conceived, free of the taint of original sin, as well as celibate. And this was further ratified at the Council of Ephesus in 431 CE, when the Virgin Mary was declared Theotokos, or God-bearer. At the same Council of Nicaea, Christianity lost the ancient feminine image of the Holy Spirit. A male trinity was formulated consisting of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Some 50 years later, in 381 CE, the Emperor Theodosius I declared that anyone who did not comply with his edict that all must believe in the Apostolic Creed defined at Nicaea, that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were of one and the same substance, would be declared a heretic. That was the beginning of heresy. At this time, all remaining Gnostic Gospels which carried vital elements of Jesus's teaching, including the Gospels of Thomas and Philip, were destroyed on the emperor's orders, not to reappear until the discovery of the Nag Hammadi texts in 1945. So why does all this matter? It matters because as all traces of the divine feminine were once again banished from the image of God, our relationship with nature was again severed. This, together with other factors, has led to the gradual de-souling of the world and the crisis we face now. At these two important councils, all trace of the brothers and sisters of Jesus and his marriage to Mary Magdalene was erased, a marriage that is clearly revealed in the recent translation and publication of the gospel that she wrote. In that gospel, the only eyewitness account of his mission that exists, Jesus, or Yeshua, his Aramaic name in this gospel, throughout refers to the Holy Spirit as his mother some 85 times. Imagine what a transformation there would be in Christianity if the marriage of Jesus and Mary Magdalene were acknowledged and an apology offered for the terrible wrong that was done to her, because she was literally obliterated and named a whore and a prostitute by Pope Gregory the Great in 591, I think it was. And she stayed that way until 1960, I think, when Pope, can't remember which Pope, I think Pius II restored her, as it were, to her sacred self. So those of you who don't know about that book, I would urge you to get it from Amazon as soon as possible. It's absolutely fascinating. Now, from the time of Theodosius in the late 4th century, Christianity became a religion of fear and persecution instead of a religion of love. The Roman Church put the emphasis of its teaching on belief and belonging to the church, not on the transformation of consciousness. It succumbed to the lure of the power principle, or what Jesus had called Caesar, or the ruler or master of the world. Inevitably, it became inflated by its immense power and immense wealth. To begin with, it tried to wipe out all traces of paganism, destroying its magnificent temples and works of art. From the time of the Crusades, it pursued endless wars, conquests, and brutal conversions in the name of its God. Its only redeeming feature in the Middle Ages were its great mystics like St. Francis, who tried and failed to return it to the teaching of Christ. For 5 centuries, from 1300, Europe suffered the terror of the Inquisition and death at the stake, a fate that was inflicted on the linguistic genius William Tyndale, as well as thousands of women. We have recently acknowledged the evils of slavery, but it was a series of papal bulls in the late 15th centuries that gave the European nations permission to invade foreign lands and to capture, subdue, and enslave, those are the actual words of the papal bull, their indigenous populations and seize all their lands and possessions. Because of this lamentable history of conquest, persecution, and subjugation, brought into being partly by the Church of Rome and partly by the European nations competing with each other for power, it is hardly surprising that preparations for war and the invention of ever more terrible weapons have become a habit that seems almost impossible to break. We can find the same impulse that led people to accuse others of heresy in our modern cancelling culture, where lives and careers are ruined by spurious accusations of wrongdoing or wrong saying. At the root of all this persecution is a complete ignorance of who and what we are. So how did so-called Christian civilization move so far away from the teaching of this extraordinary man who spoke of our indwelling divinity and the need for us to love one another, and who told us that the kingdom of heaven was within us and spread all around us, even though people cannot see it? He is the supreme representative of the lost feminine values that he tried to restore in the world of his time, that all life is sacred and our human lives are part of that sacredness. He told us to leave the dead and follow him. Who are the dead but those who continue in the old pattern of seeking power over others, who see nothing wrong in destroying the divine life that lives in and through us all? He said, "Have I not told you that when you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Spirit?" That's from the Gospel of the Beloved Companion. So we return to the present day and to Brian Cox, the most brilliant presenter of programs on the exploration of the universe, who gazes out on what he believes is a lifeless universe. He is completely unaware that the universe has an inner aspect, a consciousness which is the origin of his own consciousness. For over 2 centuries, we have been told by the materialist science that he adheres to that we are alone in a vast, uncaring universe that is without life, consciousness, intelligence, meaning, or purpose. This belief has come from the philosophy of materialist science, originating with the Enlightenment in the 18th century, as I said before, and has infiltrated every aspect of modern life, politics, and the media, particularly social media. From its perspective, there is no God, no soul, and no survival of consciousness beyond the death of the body, because the neurons of the brain are the origin of consciousness. This ideology has removed any foundation for values and sees our future in terms of further scientific discoveries and artificial intelligence. Is it surprising that so many people suffer from depression and can find no meaning in their lives beyond those presented by social media? I'm thinking of that poor girl who committed suicide when she was 14. Neither religion nor science have answered these 4 questions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where do we go to when we die? And why are we here on this planet? At this time of supreme crisis, something is beginning to shift in our species. The soul of humanity is stirring to life from a long trance-like sleep. The feminine archetype is coming back into our consciousness, bringing with it a new revelation, symbolized by this painting by my husband of a woman standing in front of the tree of life, holding a child, and greeted by an angel on the left. It took him 8 years to paint that painting. As this great evolutionary impulse gathers momentum, our rational left hemispheric mind is beginning to reconnect with our heart and our long silenced soul. A door is opening onto a new story, which astonishingly is coming to us from the science of unified physics, as defined by physicist and cosmologist Nassim Haramein, who says, a new cosmology is being born, a new vision of our profound relationship with a conscious, intelligent, and interconnected universe. He compares the astounding recent scientific discoveries to the unfolding of the petals of a rose like the one in this picture. The revelation of our profound connection to the deepest ground of life and to each other could have a powerful influence on how we live our lives, how we relate to the planet, and how we interact with each other, recognizing that our every act and even our every thought has an effect on the underlying intelligent field. Nassim and Dr. Jude Currivan, another physicist and cosmologist, whose new book, The Story of Gaia, is soon to be published, are two outstanding visionaries of our time, whose field is the nature and evolutionary intention of the cosmos. Each of them offers an outstanding revelation, and each of them is very articulate and experienced at speaking about it. So unified physics tells us that the whole universe is a unified field, a cosmic web of life which connects all life forms in our universe and on our planet. Every atom of life interacts with every other atom, no matter how great the distance between them. None of us is therefore truly separate from others or from other species of life on this planet, or from the life of the 2 trillion galaxies of the universe. Everything is connected. It's most extraordinary revelation, I think. Now, the soul that I've tried to write about so much is the cosmic sea of being, or subtle field underlying and connecting all aspects of reality, literally holding them all together. This unified field cosmology shows us that the material world exists within a stupendous field of consciousness that is the ground state of the universe. Our human consciousness is part of the consciousness which sustains not only our world, but the entire universe. Each one of us carries the holographic imprint of the universe within us. No matter what our race, nation, gender, or caste, each one of us is part of the living, breathing, connecting web of life which underlies and connects all life forms in the universe and on our planet. I call this web of life the soul of the cosmos. I prefer the word soul to mind because it carries a feminine resonance. But scientists, of course, use the scientific word field, which is perfectly fine by me. So quantum physics tells us that our world of matter is like a visible foam resting on a very deep ocean of light that permeates every cell of our physical being. We're not only connected with each other through the astonishing reach of the internet, but through the infinitesimal particles of subatomic matter that are non-locally connected with each other throughout the entire universe. In our essence, we are not a fallen, sinful species, as we've been told, but beings of light, cosmic beings, incarnated on this planet for an evolutionary purpose. All life at the deepest level is essentially one, and each of us is an expression of that one, inseparable from it. The realization that we participate in a cosmic consciousness that is the source and ground of our own consciousness is shattering the belief that material reality is all there is, that we exist in a randomly created universe, that our consciousness ends with the death of the physical body, and there is no life beyond death. These discoveries challenge the assumption that we humans are the only conscious beings in a dead universe, and that we are separate from it and from the life of all species on this planet, and that the universe is without intelligence, purpose, or meaning. In the nick of time, I think we are moving from the story of a dead, insentient universe to a universe that is vibrantly alive and the ground of all that we call life. We are moving from an image of God as a creator separate from creation to an image of God that is within the process and the patterns of cosmic and planetary life, and within ourselves as participants in that life. We are just coming to awareness of the fact that we are a manifestation of that cosmic intelligence, that we are quite literally one with God, and God is quite literally one with us. In the depths of matter, we are discovering spirit. I know this is a great deal to take in. I still haven't taken it in entirely myself, but it needs to be thought about in quiet and meditation. Divine mind is not something separate or distant from us. We are within it, coexisting and co-creating with it, even though on a minute scale. This, to me, is one of the great revelations of our time. If God or Spirit is the intelligence and creative energy of the life process itself, pulsing forth at every instant in every region of this vast universe, then how we treat so-called inanimate matter, planetary life, and each other becomes a matter of how we are treating God. In splitting the atom and creating weapons of mass destruction, and in killing others who are our soul brothers and sisters, we are mutilating and desecrating the body of God. Now, I want briefly to summarize the quintessence of Nassim Haramein's discoveries. I did a course with him about 7 years ago, a 10-week course in which I learned all that I'm giving you now. It was absolutely fascinating course. He's still giving it. He says that beneath the visible universe is an underlying electromagnetic field or matrix, like a fabric woven of energy, or a lattice or a web. There is no such thing as empty space. Space is full and it is seething with energy. And he says that we can't separate consciousness from this field because the field itself is consciousness, imprinting, exchanging, and transmitting information every nanosecond. Consciousness orders and organizes the field and its complex interconnected systems at all levels, and the evolution of the universe itself. We are part of this stupendous organization of energy, part of that consciousness. Now, where are we? Seething with energy. We can't really separate so-called inanimate matter, animate self-organizing systems like plants and animals, and self-aware organisms like ourselves. All may come to be seen as integrated components of a continuous evolutionary path of information or consciousness growing and unfolding through what we call time. I forgot to say that Jude Caravan says in her new book, and as I said before, we don't have consciousness, we are consciousness. And she also refers to the birth of the cosmos as a big breath, which I like so much. It's so much more gentle than the Big Bang. So he goes on to say that the entirety of space-time is full of fields, from the electromagnetic field of a single atom to that of each cell in our body, to the heart's electromagnetic field, to the fields of the Earth and the Sun and the 2 trillion galaxies. The whole of what we call space is full of electromagnetic fields of different magnitudes, all interacting with each other. Even the atom is a field, and the proton and electron within it are also fields. And this diagram from the HeartMath Institute shows the extent of the electromagnetic field of the heart, which is connected to the electromagnetic field of the earth when we are connected to our heart. So it's very important to come out of the mind, down into the heart in meditation as much as we can. And he says there are 100 trillion cells in our body and 100 trillion atoms in every one of these 100 trillion cells. And each one of these atoms contains a proton. Each proton contains trillions of Planck units. Everything is connected through these Planck units. Planck units, of course, are named after Max Planck, one of the greatest scientists. The size of a Planck unit is like a grain of sand compared to the size of the whole universe, if you can grasp that huge difference. Untold numbers of these electromagnetic oscillators constitute the ground of the material universe. All so-called matter is made out of protons and these infinitesimal Planck units. So these basic particles in the field are oscillating and vibrating so rapidly that there is no apparent space between them. And this electromagnetic oscillation is the ground state of the universe. The oscillation is so rapid that it makes matter appear to us as a steady state. And all these infinitesimal Planck units, protons, atoms, and cells are connected to each other and to every observer in the universe, forming a stupendous field of energy in a continuous state of oscillation. They produce a holographic structure and an incredible dynamic wormhole-like network, which connects all points across scales, generating a connected living universe that we're all part of. I think he's about to produce an equation which gives the whole of this extraordinary revelation that's come through to him. So coming near the end, I'm saying the divine spirit, this is me speaking, not Nassim. Divine spirit is the core of our being, and the soul is the intermediary between spirit and body. The body is the temple of the soul and the means of our being able to incarnate on this planet. At the same time, it offers us access to the many dimensions of the inner universe and the experience of the divine spirit within us. The more we develop the capacity for love and reverence for life, the more we are in touch with this divine spirit. So the new story is about relinquishing the fear of death, knowing that we survive death and that we are in our essence immortal beings whose life continues after the death of the physical body. We come back to this planet many, many times and to other places in the universe as well. But we don't die in our essence, in our soul. The new story tells us that cosmic light and love are the source of all life and the foundation of our being, our consciousness, our intelligence, and our capacity for love. It comes to us from the cosmos, that capacity for love. So imagine this new revelation, this new wine being born in our heart, like the unfolding petals of a rose. If the whole universe is one integrated living organism, one symphony of cosmic sounds, then we are part of that whole. We participate as co-creators in the unfolding of our life in this miraculous evolutionary process. At the heart of the cosmos is a love of unimaginable dimensions, a love that sustains the entire universe and is the origin of our own capacity to love and to create. To know this is to enable us to heal the pathology of the past. To know this is to respond to the secret longing of the life that lives us. So thank you very much. It is a pleasure to give this talk to you.